2 seconds left. The Zags are up by 6. I've got the Zags -4.5.
Oh, no.
And they let that kid run down to the side of the court and launch a three-pointer that hits nothing but net.
Oh.
Yeah, and that perfectly defines how my March Madness is going.
What is up, everyone? Brandon First, aka First Report, representing the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. Welcome into another edition of In the Paint, the Sweet 16 edition, if you will, after a crazy weekend of, well, you know it, March Madness. With me, as always, we have my co-host. We'll start with Raider Jim Martinez. You can find Mr. Martinez at Raider Jim 1090. How you doing tonight, sir?
Hey, I'm doing well. I'm waiting for my call from Warren Buffett telling me that he's got a check made out with my name on it.
Yeah. It was a very interesting first few games.
Oh yeah,
The
My
usual.
my bracket looks like Sonny Corleone at the
Oh,
Toll Booth Expressway.
oh wow. That's a visual right there, folks. If you're a Godfather fan, that is a visual. Yeah, a lot of people's brackets busted right away. I couldn't even get the first game right. I think it was Maryland beating West Virginia, and my perfect bracket went away right away. But we also do have Coach Brandon Lupian. You can find Coach at Portland 76er. How you doing tonight, sir?
Doing quite well. One thing I won't have to be stressing about is that phone call from Mr. Buffett because, yeah, just like Sonny, my bracket's full of holes.
Yeah. It's tough these days, but you know what? I think we all knew it. Obviously, it's been a crazy season of college basketball, just even the regular season, seeing so many number one teams go down. Obviously, it was a very interesting weekend for some of those top teams that were in the number one spot. But yeah, I can add my hat to that as well. I have 3 out of 4 Final Four teams still available or still alive, if you will. However, my national champ couldn't win a single game. Thank you, Arizona. What can you do? But moving on, we are going to kind of dive into to each region. We'll recap it and then, you know, maybe make amends on who we have winning it all. And we're going to start in the East. This was obviously kind of the crazy bracket with the number 1 seed in the East, the Purdue Boilermakers. They go down to 16 seed Fairleigh Dickinson. Only the second number 16 seed ever to take down a 1 seed, joining UMBC from a few years ago. We obviously also saw Michigan State, the 7 seed, take down USC and Marquette. Looking ahead, we have number 4 Tennessee versus number 9 Florida Atlantic, and on the other side, it's number 3 Kansas State versus number 7 Michigan State. We'll start with you, Raider Jim. What were your thoughts? The recap of the East Regional and who you think's going to take it.
Yeah, overall, if I may, for March Madness, we've got 2 number 1 seeds left, and that is Houston and Alabama. Purdue made history the wrong way by being taken out by Fairleigh Dickinson. And in the West, Kansas, they got past their 16 seed. Howard, and then what happened? They went down. And we can elaborate more on that when we get to the West Division. But wow, none of this surprises me. It was like one of those sucker punch situations. It seemed like I couldn't believe it when I saw Purdue, of all people, went down, and Zach Edey. That was it for him. And unfortunately, that's probably how he's going to be remembered in a lot of bar trivia. Hey, who was that big guy that played for Purdue and didn't get out of round 1? Like he was all by himself. The others in also in East Regional, we have the number 2 seed, Marquette. Shaka and his boys got taken out. Duke, who was coming around, they got taken out. and Kentucky. So you have the 1, the 2, the 5, and the 6. Wow, what a wild region it was down there. So what are we left with? We're left with number 9, Florida Atlantic, taking on Tennessee. Now let me tell you, Florida Atlantic is 9-1 over their last 10 games. I'm not going to call it an upset if they beat Tennessee. These kids are playing some good ball right now, but so is Tennessee. Real slow, not real slow, but I mean very just consistently under the radar almost, but they're playing well. But who would have thought after a mediocre season and so many head scratching weeks during pre-conference and conference play, we'd be sitting here talking about Tom Izzo has his boys fired up, playing the best basketball of the season, and wow, they're playing well. But they're going to take on a really hot Kansas State team, who's a 3 seed right now, playing very, very strong. So I'm going to give the nod to Kansas State in that one. But I will not be surprised if it's Kansas State playing Florida Atlantic in that Elite Eight game.
Yeah, it's a very interesting breakdown, obviously, when you lose the number 1 seed to a 16. And I also think there were a lot of people who had Memphis to not only beat Florida Atlantic, but a lot of people had them to beat Purdue as well. There are a lot of people who weren't sold on Purdue, myself included. However, I did expect them to at least get by FDU. But Florida Atlantic kind of spoiled all of that. Good for them going forward. A historic year for that program, and it continues. Coach, what are your thoughts on the East Regional?
Yeah, kind of concluding, kind of like what you both said about it. There's just, we talked all season long about the parity in college basketball. Ones going down, 1s and 2s and 3s, exchanging spots throughout the year. We talked about the parity. What I'm hearing on the national broadcast is how many older teams there are in this tournament. And we've spoken about that as well. I did have Purdue winning the first round game, but I did pick FAU to beat Memphis and to beat
Right.
Purdue. So, that's one of my picks that is making that look good. I thought Duke was going to handle Tennessee, but obviously Tennessee, the strength of Tennessee, the length of Tennessee, the maturity of Tennessee just kind of took. And remember, Duke's a young team. I think John Shire has a lot of searching ahead of him if he's going to stick with the same game plan as Coach K did, or he's reliant on some of these high freshman prospects to do their work into a bracket. Well, it hasn't worked much, even when Coach K was at the helm. I think as college basketball looks, and as all these teams and schools have been given that COVID year for, I believe there's going to be 1 or 2 more years of that COVID exemption for a couple of kids that were, I think, the freshmen, possibly the redshirt freshmen of those seasons that will be allowed. So it's still going to be an older basketball season in the next couple of years. Yeah, I alluded to Providence last week, and I was wondering if Ed Cooley rumors were going to be an issue, and they absolutely were. Today, I guess Ed Cooley was named Georgetown's head coach. So a lot of transactions or transitions from the end of the Big East tournament into the big dance and then gone. So Kansas State, I had winning first round and didn't expect them to get past Purdue in the next, but Kansas State, they're making a nice run. They're an older team. They were a team that we all spoke highly about when they were beating Kansas. They made a nice run in the Big 12. They're through onto the Sweet 16. And then, I don't think any of us really touched on what Coach Izzo did all season long. They were kind of floundering in the Big Ten, not knowing what to expect from them. Didn't really have a good Big Ten tournament. All of a sudden, they get USC, get them, and then they beat Vermont, to get to the Sweet 16. So, or they beat Marquette. Sorry. to get to the Sweet 16. So, you know, they don't call this March Madness for nothing. And I think everyone across the nation experienced that again. So,
Yeah, I feel kind of like Tom Izzo and his Spartans are, Jason in the, in his iteration. Every time you think they're dead, they come from out of nowhere.
yeah,
Obviously, I thought USC was going to at least, perform better than they did. And then on the other hand, Marquette, I thought they would handily take care of Michigan State. That wasn't the case, and
nope.
Izzo has
Yeah.
his boys ready to roll. It's that time of year. Myself, I picked Kansas State to win this region, so I'm not going to change anything there, but I will say Tennessee is very impressive to me. I was like you, coach. I thought Duke was going to take care of business, especially after what we saw in the ACC tournament. Really good showing by the SEC. Give credit where credit is due. They have
Mhm.
3 teams in the Sweet 16, tied with the Big East. Which ironically, I don't think we would have been terribly surprised if we said, "Hey, 3 Big East teams have made the Sweet 16," but the 3 that did from the Big East, obviously that's a surprise. And then the Big Ten, Michigan State does what they need to, but every other Big Ten team has bowed out, which is, I think, a big surprise there. But I'm going to
You know,
stick with Kansas State.
yeah, back to your Big East comment, I think they kind of lost a little bit of luster toward the end of the season because these guys were all beating each other up. And then we kind of forgot about Xavier when Manji went down, and it took some time for him to get going again. And then the timing couldn't have been better these first 2 games of the tournament.
Yeah, it was interesting to see it.
Yep.
Even UConn went
Yeah.
through. I mean, they were number 2 or 3 in the country early on, and
Mhm.
I don't want to say they were a bubble team, but they, to be number 2 or 3 in the country about midway through the season, and you're a 4 seed, that's a bit of a drop for them. They find themselves in in the Sweet 16. I will say one really cool story about Kansas State kind of got overlooked was Keontae Johnson, a kid who a few years ago actually his career and we thought possibly his life was going to come to an end on the court. He collapsed. He was in a coma for a few days. He has come back and taken advantage of kind of those obviously redshirt situations and the COVID year. He's at Kansas State, 17 and a half points. Congratulations to him to get back on the court and also be in this situation for Kansas State going forward. A big win over Kentucky the other night. So moving on to the West region. This was a very interesting one. We obviously saw another number 1 seed go down, this time in the second round. We saw 8 seed Arkansas take down Kansas to overcome an 8-point halftime deficit. We also talk about the aforementioned UConn. They actually pretty much coasted through their first 2 matchups. Looking ahead, we of course have number 4 UConn versus number 8 Arkansas, and then on the other side of the West, you have 2 seed UCLA versus 3 seed Gonzaga, and of course there is the magic word. Gonzaga, 5th straight Sweet 16. If we're talking about the West region, we got to start with our Gonzaga expert, Raider Jim. What are your thoughts on the West region?
Now, the West really wasn't too wild. It almost played out like it was supposed to. We did have the upset with that number 1 seed Kansas going down to a very strong Arkansas team. Arkansas really came along at the latter part of conference play. They played very well their first 2 games in the tournament. But let's talk about the Kansas situation for a little while. How difficult must that have been for these kids when Self was not able to take the court with them? I mean, that 8 days ago, this guy's in the ER getting ready to have his chest split open so that they can clear his arteries. And God love him, no matter what you think about the guy, he was trying to get back there for the team and even attended one of the practices. But wow, that is, people can say that that's not a distraction. People can say you just got to focus. That's got to be on the minds of the coaching staff and the players, of course. And most of all, this is when you really have to say again, this is just a game. So to coach Self, take care of yourself and look forward to seeing you back on the sidelines next season. But In the meantime, Arkansas is moving on, and they're going to take on the number 5 UConn Huskies, who are playing some fantastic basketball. West has the 2, 3, and 5 seed playing, and that's pretty good shooting right there. That means that the committee actually lined things up pretty good in this division. Look for UConn to go ahead and move on against Arkansas. UConn's just playing great basketball right now. And then what do I say about this one? Let me sum up what Raider Jim's bracket play is for the 2023 March Madness. I'm sitting at home last night. I'm jumping up and down. My dogs are barking. We're all just excited because with 2 seconds left, the Zags are up by 6. I've got the Zags minus 4.5.
Oh no.
And they let
No.
that kid run down to the side of the court and launch a 3-pointer that hits nothing but net.
Oh.
Yeah. And that perfectly defines how my March Madness is going. But Gonzaga got the win. Gonzaga moves on. There is no Jalen Suggs this year. There's no Chet Holmgren. But boy, is this going to be a great game. This might be the game to watch on Thursday. I think it is going to go down to the wire, just like it did a couple years ago. This isn't going to be a half-court shot to win it. Somebody's just going to be the decisive winner. Of course, I got to go with my heart. So in my eyes, it's going to be the Gonzaga Bulldogs moving on to take on UConn. And there we are, back to where we were in 1999. UConn Huskies and the Gonzaga Bulldogs in March Madness. It's going to be a great game, great games out of the West this weekend.
Yeah, that wasn't the only. Now I didn't have that backdoor cover. That was a tough one. There was one early on. I think it was the Alabama and Corpus Christi game. There was a last second 3 that covered like a 22.5 point spread or something.
Oh man.
Yeah, just moments where you just wonder, how in touch are the players, knowing some of the quote unquote extramarital affairs going on in the basketball game. But yeah, really tough cover there. But Gonzaga is moving on, so I'm sure Raider Jim will take that. Coach, what are your thoughts on the West region?
Yeah, I picked against Arkansas a lot of because of their coach versus their talent. I think if you look at both rosters, Kansas and Arkansas, up and down, I think Arkansas is a better talented team. Their bodies are more athletic. I think they have great length, and you know, Kansas came. I don't want to say limping in, but there was a stretch where they were playing like the number 1 team in the nation, and then they got beat by Texas, I believe, and they kind of floundered. And then, unfortunately, Coach Self had to go into the hospital. So yeah, a lot of things just weren't really working for them toward the end of the season, right for the picking. And Arkansas was that team to get them. I do have 3 teams left in this west side of the draw: UConn, Gonzaga, and UCLA. I can't agree with Raider Jim anymore. UCLA Gonzaga's probably be the best game of the Sweet 16. And if it was anything like that last one a couple years ago, it's just going to be an outstanding where both teams are going to play like if it's the finals. I do like UConn. Yeah, we talked about them early in the season. They made a nice run sitting at number 4. Then they did slip and drop. Again, it was kind of like the Big East just kept chipping each other down. Then all of a sudden, once we got out of the Big East tournament and once we got into this, the talent, the length, the size, the coaching, Danny Hurley is a baller. He's a great coach too. Very energetic, very fiery. He's got these guys looking like contenders for the Final Four. And rightfully so, the draw might have just opened up. But you never know what to expect from that Arkansas team. Now, we had this incident with Arkansas and San Diego State and Maui where the coach is just a little too excited at the end of the game, hooting and hollering, taking his shirt off, waving it on top of the scorer's table. Man, you know what? Like, win in silence, move in silence, and let your guys play and let your coaching shine quietly. I think he might just have been barking a little bit too much afterwards, and a fiery guy like Danny Hurley is going to use that to motivate his team. Um, I was watching Gonzaga last night, and I didn't have nothing um, placed on this game, but they were down when I put it on.
Oh
And
yeah.
then all of a sudden, you get the ball down to Mr. Timmy. All of a sudden, Smith starts hitting threes. All of a sudden, TCU gets into foul trouble. Jamie Dixon has no adjustments, and it's like typical Gonzaga. Good for them. I'm glad they're moving on, and it's going to be an exciting UCLA Gonzaga matchup.
Yeah, it's kind of, trickled down now to where the two blue bloods of the West Coast kind of meeting in the semifinals for that region. Obviously, I think from what I saw early on in Maui from Arkansas, this is a team that if they could have figured it out, I thought they were going to be a dangerous team. Obviously, I didn't think they would be good enough to beat Kansas, but I do think a lot of the Bill Self situation came into effect there. It's going to be a great region. I'm sticking with Gonzaga. They were my pick at the start of the tournament to win this region. I think they do it again. I just think the veteran leadership all around for Gonzaga is going to do what needs to be done against UCLA. And I really do think whoever wins UCLA, Gonzaga wins this region. Once again, I do think it is Gonzaga. So going forward, keep an eye there as hopefully we can see Gonzaga. If there's ever a year for Gonzaga to win a national championship, I think this is definitely one of them, one in which it's been kind of a crazy year and they've really kind of flown under the radar for their standards. I mean, they've been in the top 15 all season, but we're used to them being in the top 5 all season. Be very ironic if Gonzaga could win a national championship in a year where they had 2 or 3 home losses, which is something we don't see terribly often. But moving on to the other side of the bracket, we have the Midwest Regional. Quick little recap. We, of course, saw the 3 seed Xavier trail pretty much the entirety of their first round matchup with Kennesaw State. They ended up pulling it together, not only winning that game, but they got the job done in the second round as well. They're heading to the Sweet 16. And top seed Houston looks around at kind of some of the other big time programs, the number 1 seeds going down. They dominate their 2 games. Looking at the matchups in the Midwest, we have the 1 seed Houston Cougars. They will face the 5 seed Hurricanes from Miami, Florida. And then, of course, the 2 seed Texas Longhorns taking on the aforementioned 3 seed Xavier Musketeers. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts on the Midwest Regional?
I'll tell you what, if this plays out and you end up playing this region, Houston against Texas, I might even want to go wherever that game's at because the bragging rights for that is going to be fantastic. Houston is just playing some good ball. They only scored 63 points in their opening round game, and then they turned around and they put up 81 points against Auburn. So obviously, Houston is there to play to win, and I'm not surprised because we've talked about them being at the top spot or close to the top spot since non-conference play. And so they have been probably the most consistent team this 2022-2023 season. Texas is really coming around though, and they're playing fantastic ball, taking on Xavier, who also, they didn't need to make a statement, but boy, they were just taking care of business. And they're playing some very, very good basketball themselves. That game is going to be a lot tougher for Texas than some people might think. Watch for Xavier to stay close, and you never know. Some good defense, they might end up moving on. But and then my other team that I had started watching probably midway through the season this year, and they just kind of hung around, and there was something about them, and that is the number 5 Miami Hurricanes. They are just playing good ball right now. That's going to be a good one. Houston, Miami, that's going to be fast. It's going to be the track meet, but I think Houston's just going to have enough to take that game and advance into the Elite Eight. Now, watch the over-under. If you're going to bet on this one, you might probably want to look at the number, go over on this one because I think it's going to be high scoring.
Yeah, a lot of speed, a lot of athleticism on the floor on display. These games will be played in Kansas City, which is a surprise to me. I would have thought, that with the top two seeds being Texas, but Kansas, I think it's determined well before the seeds come out. But that would have been a beautiful a game in Texas if we would have gotten that. But it will be in Kansas City instead. But Coach, what are your thoughts on the Midwest Regional?
Yeah, my top team coming out of the Midwest, Texas, is still alive. I'm I remember what Rodney Terry did at Fresno State. He's a darn good coach. For him to take over that Chris Beard fiasco and do what they've been doing with good wins throughout the season. Uh, I'm glad to see where they're at right now. Two good wins going into the Sweet 16. Unfortunately, I wish they weren't facing Xavier. As much as I boasted and bragged about the Big East all season, I would like to see a Big East team get not just UConn, but get to and to get to the Final Four or past the Sweet 16. But it's going to be a great matchup. I think if Houston does get through Miami, who quietly won 2 rounds and they were slumping at the end of the year, even though they're the ACC regular season champs, they didn't come in on a hot streak and they put things together these last 2 games. Coach Larinaga has taken not only a George Mason team in the past, but also a Miami team well into the Elite Eight in seasons ago. He's got them playing well in this tournament, and hopefully their bodies could match up Houston's bodies because Houston has some grown men on that team, and as much as I don't like Calvin Sampson, he's got those guys playing up to that number 1 Midwest seed.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting for Houston going forward. Obviously, I know I doubted them going into it, but after what I've seen, the first 2 games of the tournament and now the way it's kind of shaping out, oh boy, it's going to be a real good one. Hopefully, we do get that Houston versus Texas matchup, but you don't want to discount the other 2 teams. It's interesting, Miami, they had such a good season, but I felt like every time maybe the spotlight was on them or, people started to pay attention to them. They were a top 10 team. They would just kind of, fumble the ball or fumble the
Fumble,
bag, if
yeah,
you will. Yeah,
for
and I
sure.
felt like that was going to be difficult. They even struggled early on against Drake. Now, no disrespect there. Drake was a very good basketball team, but they ended up getting the job done. My team, just like you, coach, was Texas coming out of here, so it's still alive. I'm
Yeah,
not going to change now, but with that being said, I would not be terribly surprised to see Houston come out of here. I just been very impressed with what I've seen from them over the first 2 games. But this is a different animal now. Now it's no longer kind of all eyes on kind of seeing chaos, things like that. Get to the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight, all eyes are on your one game, and you want to go out and, this is when the nerves are really going to get to a lot of these guys, especially for Houston, which, is a program that at least this century hasn't been, looked at in this, under this microscope for a while since, of course, the Phi Slamma Jamma days. But
one thing I know with this Houston team is they were talking about Sasser's hamstring or groin injury, and those things aren't easy to heal back. But I don't know what the his status was against Auburn, but man, that was a darn good win that they had. I didn't get a chance to watch it, but I keep hearing in the back of my head, "Oh, he's not 100%. He's not 100%," and that's their go-to guy. Easily a lottery pick in the draft. Um, Tough matchup for any team, let alone a Miami team that honestly I don't know much about. I mean, everyone talked about the ACC being down. I hope it wasn't in reference to Miami winning it, because why discredit what they did? They had a darn good season. So um, we'll see, right? We'll see. And I still have
yeah.
my team Texas going through, even if Houston does beat Miami. So we'll see.
Yeah, and another thing that I didn't touch on last week, and it kind of got swept under the rug, at least in my mind, but Houston had to beat Auburn in Birmingham, Alabama. That is not easy
Yeah.
for a one seed to do. Normally we're looking at a much easier road than going to your opponent's backyard, especially when your opponent is an 8 seed. But obviously didn't matter too much. They still got the job done, but that was interesting. Just wanted to throw that out there as well. So final region we'll be talking about is, of course, the South Regional, one that's very hitting close to home here for Aztec fans. Of course, this is the quote unquote region of upsets. We saw the 15 seed Princeton Tigers not only defeat Arizona, but they also continued on and they moved on. They took down Missouri as well. They are heading to the Sweet 16, another 15 seed from New Jersey moving onto the Sweet 16 after St. Peter's did it last year. And then, of course, we saw the 13 seed, the Furman Paladins, take down Virginia in one of the crazier finishes of the weekend. And then, of course, unfortunately for Furman, great news for San Diego State, but the Aztecs did advance to the Sweet 16 for the first time since 2014. Looking at the matchups, we have the 1 seed Alabama Crimson Tide facing off against the 5 seed San Diego State Aztecs. And then on the other side, the 6 seed Creighton Blue Jays taking on the Cinderella story, the Princeton Tigers, the 15 seed. Let's start with you, Coach, considering we've got San Diego State here. What were your thoughts on the South Regional?
Yeah, South Regional, yeah, like you said, had all those games that had the upsets. My team, I picked Arizona to get out of the South, and that didn't happen. I mean, Princeton, everyone was talking about 30 years ago, Princeton being UCLA, and it's not the same Princeton team as it was back then. And I was really disappointed in a Mountain West team in Utah State not getting through Missouri and whatnot. And Princeton was able to get through them and get into the Sweet 16. I think I kind of forgot myself. Creighton has a big 7-footer. They have a couple 6'8", 6'9" forwards. They have a dynamic point guard. They have a slash combo guard that's pretty good. And they're coming out of a conference that I bragged about being one of the toughest in the nation all season long in the Big East, and they were able to get through. I didn't actually have them against Baylor. I thought Baylor was going to out-muscle them, and just didn't happen. I guess I didn't watch enough Big 12 basketball to have a good judgment on it, which I kind of admitted all season long in the podcast. I wanted to go Furman. I really wanted to go Furman. I didn't know how well they scored, but I knew how UVA struggled scoring, but could just play defense. And this time of the year, your defense has to shine, and it just didn't. I think this is the toughest region that has some really strong defensive teams. Creighton's a solid defender. Bama, who was known as just a scoring machine in season past, has a higher defensive metric than our own San Diego State team that everyone knows is a defensive-minded team. And then West Virginia is a defensive-minded team. So this region really had some strong defensive teams out there. And to all of our surprises, Princeton came through. Creighton snuck in. Everyone had the number 1 overall team, Alabama, getting through. And San Diego State, they look dynamic against a Furman. What were they? 16? No.
13.
13. They beat a 13 team like a 5 supposed to beat a 13 team.
Mm-hmm.
After they got through a tough Charleston team. I mean, it was a game for a bit.
Yep.
Then I think they just settled in, and the maturity shown, and they were able to get through that first round, and then really, really rely on their experience and confidence getting through Furman, a 13 team. So they beat 2 teams that they should have beat. And the matchup next against Alabama is going to be the true test. Now, if mature men could execute and defend confidently against this Alabama team. Maybe Alabama's team's youth isn't ready for it. Maybe there's more distractions that we hadn't heard so far up until now that might come out, and you never know what San Diego State could put forth. But it's going to be an exciting Friday. I like Creighton to get through against Princeton. I just think they're a little bit deeper. They're harder to match up against. But I would not be surprised if Princeton pulls it through just the way they've looked these first two games, which is fantastic for an Ivy League school, non-scholarship. And there's some San Diego ties to that team. So I'm not mad about that either.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting time for the Aztecs to face the number one team in the tournament, the number one overall seed. Very, very interesting. That'll be a huge Friday matchup. But Raider Jim, what were your thoughts on the South Regional?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Princeton, you got to tip your cap to these guys. They're playing some good ball, but I don't think they're going to get past Creighton. Creighton was a lot bigger and deeper than I thought they were, as Coach was saying. I'm watching them the other night, and I thought Baylor was going to give them everything that they could handle and that Baylor would prevail. And it just didn't happen. And the more I watched it and went back and watched some highlights, Creighton's a good ball team. I just remember during the middle of the season, we were asking ourselves, well, what's going on with Creighton? 1 week they're there, 1 week they're not there. They were kind of inconsistent. But again, we're doing the 6-game season now. We're playing the 6-game season. 1/3 of it's done. Let's move on to the second third and see what happens. Watch for Creighton. I think they're going to go ahead and advance, get past Princeton. The Aztecs look really, really good the first 2 games, but sometimes the draw can work against you. Charleston was not the competition that I thought they would be, or that a lot of people thought they might be. San Diego State handled them very well. San Diego State also took care of business against Furman. But again, 12 seed, 13 seed. I hope it's not just total shock and awe when they get on the court against the likes of Alabama, because I remember early in the season when Gonzaga was trying to get their feet and they had that Saturday national game against Alabama. And oh my gosh, that team can play ball, hence the number 1 seed. Unfortunately, I think this is going to be more than the Aztecs are ready to handle. Watch for Alabama to move on. So we're going to end up seeing Creighton and Alabama. That's going to be a great game too.
Yeah, it's a huge matchup and a huge test for the Aztecs. I know there's a lot of people, saying, "Oh, the Aztecs, all they have to do is get to 70 points." That's a big ask from them. Let's be honest. Even getting the win over Charleston and Furman, there were times against Charleston early on where, my goodness, it was, I think I texted you all, it's kind of like watching a baby giraffe take its first steps. It's very awkward and it doesn't look natural at times. That's the way San Diego State looks on offense at times. And you can survive for 2 or 3, 4 minutes against the College of Charlestons and against the Furmans of the world. But in those moments, those mistakes, that turns into an 8 to 10-0 run against teams like Alabama, and being that good. I think a good comp would be what the Aztecs looked like against Arkansas in the Maui Invitational. Now, I do think Alabama is a step above Arkansas, but obviously SEC team, similar in the way they play. And then maybe even in terms of talent, how the Aztecs looked against Arizona in Maui. And unfortunately, that wasn't a great look. But at the same time, that was early. I think there were a lot of questions that need to be answered. The Aztecs are definitely better defensively, and I think they have a lot more veteran leadership on that court. Will that be enough? Unfortunately, I don't think so. I think Alabama does enough to get the win. If the Aztecs can keep this game in the 50s, then hey, game on. I just don't know how you stop this dynamic situation in Alabama. We're not big fans of the Brandon Miller saga, but you know what? He's a hell of a basketball player at the end of the day. And I think that they go out and they do get the job done. On the other side of things, Princeton, what a fantastic story. I mean, you completely busted my bracket, so I can't love you too much, but at the same time, it's been a great story. And I would love for it to continue, but like you said, I just think Creighton too battle tested, too much, fire, and they're not going to get snuck up on. That's what I think we see a lot of times in the first to the second round. You get one day to kind of game plan or one day to figure out what's going on. Missouri probably didn't do a whole lot of film on Princeton. It was probably a lot of looking at what Arizona does. It's human nature, right? You would expect, hey, look, if we're only going to have 24 hours to prepare for Arizona, let's look ahead to them, or let's expect them to win. Probably did a lot of film on Arizona, not a whole lot on Princeton. Well, that's not going to be the case. Creighton, they know the next 4 days they're going to be staring at Princeton film and watching how they go. So you're not going to get that kind of that surprise factor, if you will. So I do think Creighton gets the job done. I hate to say it, I do think Alabama will win this region. Once again, all the drama off the court notwithstanding, they look like the best team in the region. And at the end of the day, if you are a fan of the sport, you do want the best team to continue on. But it's going to be very, very interesting. And ideally, I hope I'm wrong, and I hope the Aztecs go out and get the job done and become the first San Diego State Aztec team to make the Elite Eight. But it's going to be very, very tall task up there with kind of taking down a guy like Kemba Walker from, whatever, 10, 12, 13 years ago in that UConn matchup. But that is all we have for you. Time to move on to the final thoughts. Let's go to Coach first. Your final thoughts.
Yeah, I think regardless of the upsets, this tournament has been what it's supposed to be. It's exciting. It's dramatic. There's Cinderellas. There's, favorites, and there's a little bit of local flavor to it. So it's been a fun tournament for me so far, and I can't wait till this Sweet 16 kicks off. I believe Thursday, Friday, correct?
Yeah, we'll get Thursday
That's
rolling.
correct.
We got like 4 o'clock, and then 4:30, and then 6:30 and 7 for those matchups. So going to be very interesting. Aztecs do play the first game on Friday.
Friday, right? Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
And Raider Jim, your final thoughts for this edition of the In the Paint podcast.
Hard to believe that we're here to the Sweet 16 and we've only got a couple weeks left of this stuff, but boy, what a good time it's been. Like, remind yourself it's a game and just enjoy it. Enjoy the competitiveness that you see out there. These young men who, a lot of them, last time they're going to be doing the team sport environment, the guys that don't even get to play, but they're there and their hearts are just as broken or just as happy when the buzzer ends at the end of the game. Let's go out and see 16 good games this weekend.
Yeah, it's going to be a great weekend, I believe, as we of course really start to hone down the final games of the college basketball season. And of course, by the end of it, we're going to crown a national champion. Myself, I talked about it last week. There were names that we didn't quite know. Now we know the Tobin Andersons, the everyone kind of figuring out how to pronounce Fairleigh Dickinson, and of course the Princetons and the Ivy Leagues, and you got to Google where these schools are from. We hit that, and it was a fantastic 4 days of college basketball, and I think we're going to get 4 more great ones this weekend. And of course, we'll have the Final Four preview for you next week, heading into the national championship game going forward. So thank you, as always, for listening to this edition of the In the Paint podcast, presented by the First Off the Bench podcast network. Once again, huge shout out to Gray Space. Thank you again for putting this all together. It is time for you all to go wash your hands and stop hating, everybody. We'll talk to you all very soon. Enjoy the games this weekend and take care.